Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We are live at the Lovett School for a lovely conversation with some of our colleagues who are visiting us for our annual reverse fly-in program. And so before we get into a few housekeeping notes, I wanted to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and let them know. But first, I will introduce myself. My name is Anita Hua, and I'm the Director of College Counseling here at Lovett. So we'll start with you, Melissa.
Okay.
Will you introduce yourself to the folks at home?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My name is Melissa Klein. I serve as Director of Admissions at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Derek DeBose. I have the privilege of serving as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Enrollment and Director of Admission at the University of Denver.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nate Crozier. I serve as the Assistant Vice President of Admission and Marketing at the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida.
Hello, good evening. My name is Claudia Marroquin, and I'm Senior Vice President and Dean of Admissions and Student Aid at Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine.
Our colleagues have joined us this week, and we're so excited. We've had a full schedule. They've met with quite a few of you on campus already, but we are just really excited to have a conversation. This program is certainly geared towards upper school parents, and so we did encourage you all to send questions in advance. But if you have a question that you must ask, my colleague Chris Rodriguez will also be looking out in his email. That's chris.rodriguez@lovett.org for any of the folks at home who really have a question or would like some clarity around something that we discussed tonight. With that being said, we're going to try our best to get those questions in. Please realize we are actually streaming this, and so there is a slight delay. We will try to let you know when we're closing shop so that you don't send any questions that might not get answered. But thank you guys for joining in with us tonight. So the first question, knowing that these individuals are not our admissions representatives, they're not, as we would refer as the road runners, the ones who are going to all the high schools meeting and engaging with students and parents, I want to know from their perspective and their roles, what advice you all would give to prospective students.
I'll go first. I always tell students to take their time with this process. While we do say it's a process, it isn't just about getting into college, though that will be the outcome, but it's really a moment to think about the things that you value, that you hope to get out of your college experience. And if getting into college is the only thing on your radar, you're not necessarily going to have fun with the process. And I know it's much easier for me to say that, but it is about self-reflection and really looking inward to then be able to really identify a school that's going to be a really good home for you. And it's not just for 4 years, you're going to be connected to this place for a lifetime. So it's really about trying to make that match and love the place, not just for the academics, but for who you might end up becoming while you're there.
I would dovetail off of what Claudia began with great advice and basically recommend that families set aside a specific time once a week to come together to discuss maybe websites they've perused or recap of college visits they've had. But then outside of that half an hour each week, you basically don't discuss the college search process, lest it become kind of something that takes over your family life every day of the week, every week of the month. So setting aside that one specific time for 30 minutes to an hour.
I would say for me, as for students especially, but also collectively as families, to be open. There are so many different colleges and universities that are out there, and we get it. We see the U.S. News and World reports, we see the top 100 universities that are listed there, but it doesn't mean that's the top 100 university for you. And so at the end of the day, I strongly encourage our students just to be open to learning as much as you can about so many other colleges and universities that exist, but also don't let this process stress you out. This is not meant to be stressful for you as a student. It's meant to celebrate you and what your next step in life may be in your future. So celebrate it, but don't let it stress you out.
I would agree with everything that my colleagues here have said. I would encourage students and families to remember that this is your process, to limit the number of external forces and external opinions that may be coming your way in terms of your search and finding a college that's going to be the right fit for you. Because what is the right fit for you is not necessarily the right fit for your best friend or your cousin or another family member. So remember to focus on what your priorities are and what you're looking for from an academic and social experience.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into it. As our sophomore families, even maybe ninth grade families, but certainly our 11th grade families are now starting to navigate a world where they want to visit colleges in person, if that's an option. And as they're poking around your campus, what could be your favorite spot on campus that they might want to tiptoe that's not on the tour, but could be a really cool spot for them to check out while they're visiting?
I'll go first. At the University of Denver, one of my favorite spots on our campus is called the Fourth Story. And so the Fourth Story is located in our community commons, and it's this gorgeous outdoor patio that overlooks the mountains in the city of Denver. There's lots of intimate spaces that you can go have lunch, grab a bite to eat, hang out with friends, and it really overlooks the entire university and just feels so at peace, having both that mountain view and city view right there together.
I'll go next. My suggestion is not even on Furman's campus. It is the city of downtown Greenville itself. I think as much as you are going to be at a college or university for your academic home, your social home, you're also becoming a member of that local community as well. So I think it's important when you're visiting college campuses to save some time to explore the city that's nearby. I'm very biased. I think Greenville is one of the best places to visit in the country, if not the world. So spending some time in our downtown area, shopping, grabbing a bite to eat, gives you a sense for what that student experience is like on the weekends.
I'll go next. I actually like what Melissa has done and given something off campus. What I would say is we always recommend prospective students and their families to grab Cuban cafecito when they're in Miami. You can do that while visiting Little Havana, which is not far from our Coral Gables campus. You can also do that when you're on campus at Vicky's, which is a great spot to grab a cafecito. Lastly, I would say off the beaten path, if you can navigate the Coconut Grove neighborhood, which is about 10 minutes from Coral Gables campus, you will see wild peacocks, which still blow my mind, but lots of fun.
And I'll follow a similar theme there. The place that I would recommend is actually an extension of our campus. So 15 minutes from our campus, we have our Coastal Studies Center. And because we're located in Maine, I always encourage families, especially those who are coming from bigger cities, to get out to the coast. I'm originally from Los Angeles, and that was a huge draw for me, was the proximity to the water. But I think for students at Bowdoin, the environment, whether you study it, you enjoy the outdoors, or you've never quite had the opportunity to really play in the outdoors, it becomes a part of your experience. And the Coastal Study Center is a research facility, but it's also a place where our students do go hang out on the docks. And I think it's also a place to just appreciate nature. So I highly encourage the coast.
So I need to go to y'all's campuses and visit some of these spots. I'll get you guys to write those down before you leave. So as we continue to think about our 11th graders who are actively thinking about next year and that college application process, I think one thing that has come up multiple times are about the changes that maybe existed before COVID, but certainly have presented themselves as a result of the pandemic. And so with that in mind, let's jump into the conversation about test scores and test optional. And certainly would love to hear what your schools do, but also your philosophy or your thoughts about the direction that we're headed in with test optional and test scores.
Well, I'll jump in first, and I feel like I'm usually comfortable taking this question because Bowdoin was test optional starting in 1969. So all of the changes that have really come about in the higher ed landscape because of COVID in regards to testing wasn't something that was entirely new for us. What we've always been telling families is that our process, we have the good fortune of being able to devote the resources to really dig into the experience the student has had in their classroom based on their school environment, recognizing that no two schools are the same. So our evaluation really digs into that specific environment. But then we also, because we're a small campus, we really value the person and all of those experiences that might be had outside of the classroom. Test scores, to us, do not tell us about a student's ability to succeed in our forms of classrooms. I always do tell students, yes, you're going to have exams, you're going to have assessments, but it's really about the conversations that our students are having, how they're taking that learning beyond the classroom, and the test score does not tell us that. What we get out of having an SAT or an ACT is that you know how to prepare for that exam really well. It's one form of skill, but it is not the skill that you're necessarily going to practice and exercise as often when you're on our campus. So we always have told students to use the information that we put out there as a guide to figure out if your test scores reflect the larger story that you're telling through the entire application. It is a data point in our process. It has never been the part of the application that slows us down or that we wonder why a student may not have submitted testing. And I think that's going to be the larger conversation and the things that you, as you are navigating this process, are going to have to really consult with the counselors here to figure out how your test score might end up relating to the rest of your application and whether you want to present that to a school, knowing that now you have options and that you do not have to submit them to every single school, and that you can really figure out how to strengthen your application for that particular institution that you're applying to.
I mean, what I would add for the University of Miami is success on our campus is more strongly correlated with, you know, how a student has thrived over the 3 years in high school, like the grades we see in 9th, 10th, 11th, as well as the coursework that that student would take in grades 9 through 12, than any 3 hours on a random Saturday throughout the year taking the SAT or ACT. You know, all that said, for us, test optional means exactly that, test optional. So if you choose to apply and ask us to consider your test scores, we will absolutely do that, bearing in mind that, you know, the GPA that you've received, the curriculum you've taken within the context of Lovett is still going to drive our decision making, and the test score will be used to inform that holistic review as well as the other factors that Claudia just talked about. If you apply test optional, we do have one less data point, so we will be paying particular attention, again, to the coursework, the rigor, and then the other aspects of our holistic review process.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I concur with my colleagues on that, that it's important for you to do what's best for you ultimately in this process, in this situation. And for us at the University of Denver, I know with many of my other colleagues around the country, test score optional really is test score optional. For us, we had entered the test score optional landscape pre-pandemic, so we were very fortunate to already be in the landscape of how to navigate and manage this process early on. But I get what it is. I understand, you know, in our own communities, it's very easy to listen to testing consultants and coaches, and they'll say, oh, you need to submit your test. I encourage you, wherever you apply, reach out to the university. Ask them what their philosophy is, because they're the experts. They're going to know the philosophy of their institution, not someone else that's not affiliated with that institution.
And I agree with everything that my colleagues have said. Furman is also an institution that was test optional prior to the pandemic. We started test optional in 2011. And the only other pieces of advice I would give to students are to ask themselves a couple of reflecting questions as it relates to whether or not to submit a test score. Are you proud of your score? Do you feel that it aligns well with your academic performance throughout high school? If the answer is yes to those questions, for Furman specifically, then maybe consider applying under test review. But if the answer is no to those questions, know that that test optional piece is an option for you that's going to let the academic components throughout your Lovett experience to shine.
So Nate just jumped right on in there, talked about these course these courses and the rigor and looking at that transcript in its entirety, especially if a student is applying test optional. So let's go there. What the rigor, okay? So we have been talking a lot about that today and even last night when you all joined us first. And so let's explain this idea and concept behind context of the high school and what that means and how that translates when we talk about rigor. Anyone, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kick things off. I mean, so the starting point would be when we talk about context of the high school environment, we just mean what's available to you at your high school. So, it doesn't matter to us, what the public school down the road offers. It doesn't matter to us what, your competitor private institutions down the street offer. It matters what's available to you at Lovett. So, we find out what's available to you. We learn about, any sort of restrictions, for example, on the number of APs. Plus, we have historical data for your school, in terms of past applicant pools and knowing, generally speaking, what students have taken in the past and how competitive that was within, again, the context of the Lovett school community. And so that's really where we start. Now, let me be unequivocally clear. For us, we don't have, a threshold or a specific number of APs, for example, that a student would need to have taken in order to be admissible at the University of Miami. Again, it's about challenging oneself where appropriate, right? Not pushing too hard so that you're taking so many APs that all of a sudden your grades start to tank, because again, it's this balancing act, right? And for that reason, I would really encourage you to not think about APs as in terms of numbers, but in terms of what you want to get out of your education here at Lovett and what areas you might want to push yourself, again, where appropriate. The other thing I'll just mention, which is not specifically tied to rigor, but again, something that's on the transcript, in addition to your grades, which we recalculate a grade point average, we also pay particular attention to grade trends. So, the context is maybe you had, a blip on your academic radar, right? A tough year in 9th grade or 10th grade. The most important thing for us is to see that sustained upward grade trend and kind of how you're making the most of the last, year or 2 years of your career before you graduate.
I would add that beyond just the context of the AP conversation, much of our role and the role of our recruiters who do visit Lovett throughout the fall or throughout the year is to understand the curriculum and understand the unique environment of the Lovett school and the opportunities that your students have throughout the time they are students here. For example, American Studies being the course that our juniors are taking right now, understanding that it's taught at the level, if not beyond the level, of AP level coursework and preparing you for college in a very different way. So understanding some of the unique programs and distinctions that Lovett would have to offer is part of understanding that context of academic environment.
And I'll dive into that with not just Lovett specifically, but we as admission officers, we understand that too, about Lovett. And we understand about that about many institutions all over the country, that our admission officers are building those close relationships. They're studying their territories. They take the opportunity to really get to know the schools and the school counselors and the college counselors that are in that environment. So we have a firm understanding of the curriculum, of the rigor, of the opportunities that were afforded to you. And I think it's important that we also don't get, as we say, don't get lost in the sauce. And so with that, we don't want you to get lost in the message of, well, if I went to this type of school, my admission outcome would be a little different, regardless of what that decision may be. I think it's important for you to remember that you're going to always be evaluated in the context, at least for our institutions, of Lovett. It's not that we're comparing you to another school from down the street or across the state. It's going to be in context of the academic offerings of your school. So you're already advantaged because you're competing, you're not even competing, you're just being evaluated against your peers and other students that have the same type of academic experience that you have had.
The one thing I would add, and it's going back to a comment Melissa made, especially around the American Studies program, is that I think often people think about rigor as just AP or honors. And students are not machines. They will have the areas that they become naturally inclined to, and maybe it's the languages, and they're really intrigued by learning multiple language. Rigor can also look like a student taking 2 languages to really stretch themselves in an area that they find fascinating. So I think when we're looking at applications, yes, we're looking at exactly what the school offers, the limitations, but then we're also drilling in at what a student has chosen for themselves, what they're telling us that they're interested in, and then how they're actually starting to pursue those opportunities, because at the end of the day, college is about the choices that a student is going to have in the way that they're going to learn, stretch, and engage in conversation, and it's about engagement. And the student really giving it their all and pushing against the current way of thinking to really maximize the learning opportunity. And that all goes into that conversation around rigor.
Earlier today, we had some conversations and we talked a lot around the type of skills that you all want to see more on your campus as students are graduating from high schools across the country, and Lovett included in that. What are the types of skills that you all would love to see more on your campus, or that you already are seeing, but our families might not know yet?
I'm going to take it a step outside academics for a moment here and focus on character and you being a person, empathy, care, consideration for others. As we're building our campus communities, we want you to thrive and be a part of that community, but we want you to support and be of encouragement of other students in our communities as well. So we want you to take a moment to reflect as well of what are you doing here at Lovett? How are you encouraging one another? How are you supporting other students in your school environment? Academically, there's going to be a lot of students out there that have amazing grades and amazing accolades, but who are you as a person? Why do I want to have you on our campus and bring you into our community? So that's one of the things I always focus in on, because we get so caught in the grade aspect and sometimes the testing aspect, but there's so much more to this than just apples and oranges. It's you collectively as an individual.
I would just mention, and this is something that, I think, a liberal arts curriculum or a curriculum that kind of opens up and allows you to explore different academic areas is something that I know we're focused on at the University of Miami, and a lot of, actually, I think all of our institutions are focused on. And that's really important because, you start to either gain or hone your analytical skills, and those skills are very important because not a lot of the problems in the world today are prescriptive, and so being able to kind of think outside the box, is extremely important. Being agile and adaptable also is something that's, I think, a sought-after skill, and flexible, as well as communication, and that's where, the communities that we're all trying to respectively build with students from, all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, from different spectrums, socioeconomically, racially, ethnically, citizenship, it really kind of comes together in a classroom environment that helps you have conversations that are multinational, which is going to lend itself to you when you go out and get a job or pursue graduate or professional school. The last thing I'll say is back to the point on analytical education and skills, is that when I graduated, they said that the person would have an average of 12 to 14 jobs over their career. That number has since increased, believe it or not, and now they're saying that I think it's like 23 or 24 jobs in 4 or 5 different industries, at least 1 or 2 of which haven't even been invented yet. So again, this idea of honing your analytical skills to be able to kind of think outside the box and create solutions that aren't prescribed, I think is going to be hugely important.
I think I've actually had a number of conversations with faculty, so what they have said is, while students eventually develop this on campus, they come with a hesitancy around risk-taking. And I think part of that might be a part of the admissions process where they believe that perfection is what we are looking for, and that is certainly not the case. And for some reason, I feel like students have internalized it as, if I have an outcome or a goal, I need to stay on the steady track to reach it, rather than recognizing that some of the biggest learning moments and where you really grow the most and have these aha experiences are by taking a risk and doing something that feels really uncomfortable. And it's through that discomfort and being able to grapple with either failure or a different point of view, that's really where students elevate, not just in their skills and around being able to be critical thinkers and really analyze the information that's being thrown at them, but I think it's also just, to be candid, a more worthwhile experience when you're free to take pivots. And I think I'm starting to feel like pivot is a trigger word with everything we've experienced the last 2 years. But those tend to be some of the most successful students on our campus and even beyond, are those who saw an opportunity and were okay to kind of go off the path that they had created for themselves. And that's where they end up finding a lot of fulfillment in the journey that they're on. So I would love to see students taking more risks and being okay with not having perfection in everything.
I could not agree more with everything that you all have said. As I've been thinking about what I would add to additional characteristics, I keep coming back to the idea of being a global citizen, recognizing that as much as the college experience, you're investing in yourself, but you're investing in yourself for a greater purpose. So individuals who I would say thrive on our campus, a characteristic that we love to see is that willingness to serve and to give back to the local community, to the school community, to their home communities as well.
So Claudia, let's pivot and talk a little bit about our seniors right now. Some of our seniors have a little bit of a longer process, and they are receiving news like they may have been deferred from an early decision or an early action process, and maybe wrestling with what that means beyond what our office might be saying. And so because we have you all here, if a student was deferred from your institution, what does that look like? What does that mean, and what should they be doing next?
So I'll speak for the context of my institution at the University of Denver. If a student is deferred from the university, it's okay. It doesn't mean it's over, it doesn't mean it's the end of the road, it just means a lot of times many colleges and universities only have so many seats available. And you still have, for example, you've read an early decision student, you've read early action, you still have regular decision students or early decision 2 students to read, and you don't want to give every single admission decision out right away. You want to evaluate the entire applicant pool. So it means you're still in play, you're still in the game. But with that, it doesn't mean you have to send us every piece of information. With that being said, if there's true significant changes, yes, reach out to us, share that information with us. However, if it's like, oh, I got an A in this class, I had a B+ last semester, I don't know if that's going to make as much of a difference in your final admission decision. However, when there's significant information, we don't need additional letters of recommendation. We get it, you're an amazing student, we know that already. But if it's significant information, such as significant changes in grades, significant changes in accolades, or something that's happened in the past few months, yes, share that with us. And it's okay to reach out to your counselor and share that, yes, I'm still excited about your institution. I want to be on your campus. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But also, I always encourage you to kind of take a step back and not overdo it, but it's okay to reach out, but within reason.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of the defer, which I couldn't agree with more with what Derek has said, is basically just it's not a final decision. I mean, we want to see kind of how you look within the kind of total context of our entire applicant pool, right? What I would say, maybe some changes in terms of what's been happening with the landscape around students who've been deferred the last couple years is there's this concept of opting in, right? And we certainly aren't the first, but we have kind of gone down that road because for deferred EA applicants, we are, and we say this, we look at demonstrated engagement after the point of the deferred decision. So, we have a deferred decision acknowledgement form that we ask folks who still want to be considered, fully considered in regular decision, to let us know that they need to opt in. And furthermore, if a family and the student decides that, as this decision and other decisions have rolled in, UM sits atop their college list, then they can opt in to early decision 2, and then they'll receive a final admission decision, fall admit, spring admit, waitlist, or deny, with all of the other early decision 2 candidates. That's something that we've adopted last year and continued this year. What I would also say is, for those who opt in and want to be considered in regular decision, I think sending updated academic information, mid-year grades, if a student maybe sat for an exam at the end of the calendar year, December, they can send those scores in. But other than that, additional letters of recommendation, we don't need that. It's really about how you progressed, academically in your senior year.
Yeah, one thing I would caution against, just because my colleagues have covered so much good information already, is, this idea of becoming a pen pal with the admission officer. You also do not have to go to the extremes of visiting the campus to demonstrate that extra interest. Again, we recognize you've already applied early to us. You've already demonstrated that this is a place that you see as being a really good match for you. And as Derek and Nate have already said, it's about sending updates that have changed. At that point, you would have applied probably in early November, and you receive your decision, if it's an early decision one, probably around the middle of December. We're going to be reevaluating you within, again, the regular decision applicants in February. So whether your course selection may have changed, that's an update, but you don't have to just write to write. And certainly don't have to feel like you need to go through the extreme of visiting or getting an interview or having a one-on-one conversation. We already have the information that we need to make that decision in our regular pool. So part of it is recognizing, okay, I have to regroup, talking to the counselors, and making sure that then you're also putting your time and effort into applications that you have in regular decision. Because the reality is there are going to be a number of different factors that we have to manage, whether those are institutional priorities and just the demand on seats. And whether it's an admission offer later on or it ends up becoming a final decision of refuse, my big advice to students too is to recognize that this is not a statement on your worth. And this goes for every decision you'll be getting, whether it's an early one, a deferral, or in regular decision. That you should be looking at a couple of institutions that you could be happy at, and that, I shouldn't be, none of us should be saying this, but you can probably be happy at a number of institutions and not just one.
That's lovely. You want to be a college counselor one day?
I did think about it at one point.
Well, on that same note, though, now we have waitlist. And some students have already received a decision of a waitlist, as some schools are exploring that as an option for early action and sometimes early decision. But if a student is to be waitlisted, what does that mean?
I will say this, as an institution that utilizes a waitlist decision out of early action, and largely that has to do with our timeline and how we as an institution specifically review, that likely we will not have many of the updates that we may need to review that student thoroughly in regular decision. So we'll waitlist a student out of early action. I think much of what has already been discussed for defer would also apply to the waitlist component. One thing I was thinking about with the defer conversation, in line with some of the characteristics that we like to see in students, I think there are a couple pieces here: how a student reacts to that potential setback or that potential disappointment, and also self-advocating in your communication with the admissions office. I think a lot of times I will hear more often from parents with that disappointing news, and I would much rather connect with a student in that particular time. I think it shows a lot of maturity and also allows the student to articulate what it is about my institution that they're interested in. I think at that point, demonstrating that interest, that yes, Furman, for example, sits at the top of the list, can be very beneficial in that waitlist discussion. And I'll turn to my colleagues if you have anything that you would add from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the waitlist decision essentially means that we can't, like, we have competitive applicants for whom we don't have enough space. And, you know, every year we carry a wait list. Actually, when a student's waitlisted, first off, we offer them a spot on the wait list. So I think one of the most important things I can convey, if that's a decision you receive from an institution, you don't have to accept your spot on the wait list, but keep in mind that for most colleges and universities, they will look at demonstrated engagement, you know, if and when they go to the wait list. So if you haven't accepted your spot on the wait list, you shouldn't expect a call if that institution goes to the wait list, right?
And let's drill down on that timeline that you just mentioned too, if and when an institution would go to.
Yeah, so I mean, that's going to depend. So, you know, I think what I would say is, you know, as admission managers, you know, we build out projections a lot, and we have different admission plans, but we would hold X percent of the class to bring in from the wait list, right? Because it helps us round out the class, you know, shape the incoming class based on institutional priorities. But here's the thing is our use of that projection on spots for the wait list admits will depend on the yield rate, so the percentage of admitted students in early action and regular decision who accept our offer and will submit a deposit. So, for example, last year, we didn't use the wait list at all because, you know, we received a much bigger return on our early action and regular decision admission offers. I think back to, you know, fall of 2020, fall of 19, we absolutely leveraged the wait list to help us meet our enrollment targets. So, you know, it can be as little as a handful of kids, or 1 or 2, 3%, or it could be as much. I think one year it was, you know, 9 or 10% of our incoming class was admitted from the wait list. The last thing I'll say is, you know, similar to what Claudia pointed out, you don't need to become pen pals with your assigned admission counselor. However, it is beneficial kind of, you know, mid to late April or past May 1 to at some point let your assigned admission officer know if that school is atop your college list. Because again, and be genuine about it. It's not sending out that message to every single school, you know, at any point through the process. It's being genuine about it. But again, I think doing that once to let them know is something that's important. And again, when we go to the wait list just depends. I mean, I've gone as early as the second week in April. I've gone, the earliest sometimes that we can do it is post May 1. So it just depends on the year.
And for our families at home, that May 1 date that we're referencing is historically been the national reply date for all students across the country. And of course, that's something that's getting a little blurry these days, just depending on how many applications colleges and universities have to process and how many students they have to engage in the process. So with that being said, May 1 is typically that date that you'll hear us talk about students making a decision with the decisions that they've received from colleges and universities. But the college counselor in me says for a student who is waitlisted that you would want to consider getting excited, especially if you've been waitlisted from your first choice, your second choice, whatever it may be, to start getting excited about another institution, because yes, they could go to the wait list as early as April 1, but they could go as late as June. And so at that point, you would have to have paid an enrollment deposit and let another institution know that you're going. And that's kind of in the weeds at this point, but that's certainly some of the support that our office gives for students and families so that we can help them navigate that wait list, defer, all of those things. And I do want to address the elephant in the room. Claudia left, but she was not upset by the conversation. She actually had a flight to catch, and I was supposed to announce that earlier so that we could have actually said goodbye to her. But she is not with us because she needed to catch a flight and get down to the airport. So with that being said, did anybody else have anything else to say about wait lists? Is that pretty good? Okay. I want to know a little bit about for you all, knowing that an admissions representative that is to help assist students and families, they've been assigned to Lovett, to the state of Georgia, or to the Southeast, however you all dictate territories. But for you all in your offices, what is consuming most of your time right now? What did you sacrifice to be here in Atlanta, Georgia at the Lovett School?
Right now, what's consuming my time is a huge influx of admission applications, help guiding my team through reviewing those applications, but not only that, there's a reality right now for many colleges and universities around staffing right now. So many of us have open positions because of the pandemic. There's just been, life has happened for so many folks, and so for many of us, we're understaffed. It doesn't mean we don't want to connect with you, it's just we have a limited amount of resources to do the work that we need to do, and in my role, I have to prioritize what's most important for my institution and my team to get that work done. So right now, that's what my big focus is making sure that our students are getting their admissions decisions in a timely fashion, but also that our team has the time and resources to read those applications to make those decisions.
I agree wholeheartedly.
I mean, I would just add that this is the time of year when, you know, we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So, you know, we're reviewing, we're decisioning, we're trying to yield the incoming fall class, but at the same time, we also are thinking about the juniors, right? The following application cycle, and making sure that we're putting programming together to help you understand our institution's value proposition among a landscape of many great 2- and 4-year institutions that students may be considering. You know, right now at the University of Miami, for example, we have kind of a palette of virtual options for not only prospective juniors, but also admitted students that will be taking place. We are about a week and a half away from resuming in-person information sessions and student-led campus tours, being mindful that from mid-February through the end of April, those opportunities to visit in person and be led around campus by a current undergraduate will be reserved for admitted students, since they're on a shorter timeline for making their enrollment decisions. But immediately thereafter, May 2nd, those opportunities in person will flip and be available for prospective juniors and their families. So that's some of the stuff that we're also working on.
Okay. I was trying to type my next thought, my bad. I want to know, since you guys have spent a good amount of time with us thus far, and someone on this panel knows Lovett very well. That's Melissa Klein. She's a Lovett alum. Anyway, what has surprised you most about your visit? And only good things, only good things.
I'll take it from the perspective of I'll say the personality and the lifeblood and the community of Lovett is still the same as it was when I was a student. So refreshing to see that continuity. Of course, the physical landscape of the campus has changed quite a bit. I am liberal arts through and through, having gone to Furman for my undergraduate experience, and I've found myself reflecting on so much of what the academic experience here is teaching you how to think critically, how to have really great conversations inside the classroom. So I think a helpful reminder to me that the way that Lovett structures the curriculum and the experience and how you engage with one another very much mirrors what the college experience should look like.
I would say, for me, we've had a couple, I wouldn't say sessions dedicated to it, but I think we've had some conversations as part of sessions that have centered around student well-being. And again, let me be clear, I don't get the sense that this isn't something that's been a priority for Lovett. I just think that, you know, post-COVID, I think the concerns, the questions, the issues have been amplified. And I would also kind of reinforce the point that we on college campuses are also kind of diving, head first into those to make sure that we have the resources and support, and we're really kind of, coalescing around trying to understand what the problem is and what it is that needs to be solved, because it's something that has changed somewhat drastically over the last year or two, right? So that's what I would say. I mean, I'm very heartened to know that it's something that that this school's trying to crack that nut, right? On a personal note, something that's been surprising. I'm from Pittsburgh originally, and it never ceases to amaze me after having been in Miami now for 4 years, how cold I can be, even if it's like in the 50s or low 60s. I am freezing on this trip. So at any rate, that never ceases to surprise me.
No, I will say, of course, I've shared this with the team earlier. I was thinking back throughout my admission career, and for just shy of a decade, spent that time recruiting the Atlanta, Georgia region and being the counselor for the Lovett School. It's just been interesting kind of seeing how how the aesthetics of the institution have changed, but so much has remained unchanged in terms of the level of care and support that your community has for your students here. I think that's something that's very noble. Commitment to access is something that I hold dear, and it's just great and reassuring to continue to see that from the Lovett community. So for me, it's just wonderful to be back here and connecting with you all and just seeing the wonderful things that your students are doing, but also the true commitment as parents and loved ones that you have for your students.
Okay, I think we're gonna wrap this up. I'm just gonna look to my colleagues. No, we're okay. I think we're all ready for dinner. So we're just gonna wrap it up with like parting words. I did have them enjoy an activity with us earlier where they had to tell us where they were from a fist to 5, whether we were closed or we were open. I'm not gonna have them do that again. They also had to pair that with a song. So I'm not gonna do that again, but parting words for our families, whether they're 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, just in terms of, what excites you about the industry and what they should be excited about as they look at college admission and college possibilities.
I'll say in the moment what excites me is being able to be in person with colleagues, because so much of what we've been doing is virtual, so it's refreshing to be back face-to-face with you and your prospective students when you're visiting on our campus. I think that's what gives us energy, is the ability to connect, to share our communities with you. So I would say that's what brings me energy right now. I would say a piece of advice I would give you all is to use the incredible resources that you have here at Lovett. I mean, programming like this evening, the amazing college counseling team who know the ins and outs of the work and are there to guide you and support you through this process.
I would say a takeaway that I have from this evening is just, this has been a great experience, and just again, connecting with friends and colleagues, because you all have such a great gift of counselors here at Lovett, and many of us have known each other for a long time, and I think it's great to have that resource to advocate on your behalf from Lovett. I think it's important for you as parents and loved ones and students that may be with us this evening to know and understand that. But a word of advice I will always give as a closer is for our parents and loved ones, be the cheerleader for your student. Be their biggest advocate, be their biggest fan. There's gonna be highs and lows. Remember, this isn't necessarily your process, this is their process. So the best that you can do for your student is to support them and encourage them to make whatever decision they're gonna make, knowing it's the best for them. Encourage them to look at all kinds of different places, but be that support system, because when there comes that little moment of doubt, they're gonna rely on you at the end of the day. So be there for them and support them.
I mean, I'm trying to think of I maybe would just say, and I'm not going to talk a lot about it because, I think Claudia raised the point earlier in the presentation or panel about this process is ultimately about student self-discovery, right? College setting, rural, urban, suburban. size of classes, right? Can you be okay in a a lecture of 400, or would you prefer or need a more intimate classroom setting? And so again, you stand kind of at the beginning of a process which I think is pretty exciting. The thought of like being able to drive with mom and dad or fly with mom and dad, to look at different campuses, to admire different types of architecture, to learn about different programs. I'm kind of reminded, that really our higher education is the envy of the world because there's options, right? So what I would say is, as you're learning about yourself and kind of narrowing your list, don't narrow too much, because at the end of the day, as we've kind of alluded to, there's more than one institution that I think would fit the bill in terms of what you're looking for and where you could thrive. I mean, there's so many great options out there. And also, I love your school. I've known of your school for a while. You have great resources and support here. Your parents love and care for you. And ultimately, you're going to be okay, and you're going to get to your long-term goals, and there's multiple paths, different paths you could take to get there. But you stand at a point in the process, which to me is very exciting. It's very exciting.
I think our office thinks it's really exciting too. And just as a reminder, I mean, our office, we love what we do. And before coming to love it, we were with these colleagues at college fairs and all the things, and wanted to connect more closely with students and the student experience through this process, because it should be fun. And it's also a very special moment. And I am excited to meet all of you who we have not had the chance to meet yet. And if you did not get your question answered, please reach out to any of us in the College Counseling Office. We're happy to help you and help you navigate some of those questions. Any last? We ready for dinner? Okay. Thank you guys for joining us, and we hope you have a great night.
Take care.